Did you do
Here
it?
we go.
There you go. Okay, here we go.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I am so ready.
Okay.
I was ready at 4:30.
Ellen, Ellen, what's our favorite cocktail?
Are we really going to talk about
No,
that?
no, no, no. No, we enjoy the Triangle Media team is really good about working hard and playing hard and building community and having lunch meetings, and we got to really know each other over the last couple of years, strategizing for local businesses.
Right. Well, I think it's very indicative, like in a community setting like this, relationships are everything. And so we've always, I think, gotten really involved at a personal level with people, and our whole business is about helping people to have a better life here, build a better business here, and getting to know you was so much fun. And then even more fun when I got to know Katie.
Yeah.
I know. That's great.
Well, so a little bit about you. You have been in Chapel Hill for how long?
23 years. 23 years.
So technically a native by proxy.
Thank you.
You have your card.
I consider myself. I made my choice, so I feel that there's a lot of people that are not happy with me up north. But but I've coaxed some of them down, which I know is not easy to do.
Can you, where up north are you from?
So I was born and raised in New Canaan, Connecticut, which is about an hour outside of New York City, a small town of about 20,000 people. And most of the people work in New York City, as my husband and I ended up doing. We raised our children halfway in Westport, Connecticut, which is in that same area, very much a bedroom community for New York. And then we moved down here when our oldest graduated from high school, and we still had two more that were young enough to move. And we came here because we started looking for colleges for our oldest kid. We had no intention of moving from Westport, and we really just fell in love when we came here and thought, why not? Like, why not? And it was a huge decision for us. We were both very ingrained in the media business up there. But we knew a better thing when we saw it. We thought it would be a better life for our kids. And we had no intention of launching a media company when we moved here because I had my own consulting business at that point. I had sold a media company that I had owned up there. And I was consulting with the new owners. And they didn't care as long as I was willing to get on an airplane and come up once every week or two. That was fine with them. And my husband was trickier. He was VP of editorial and design for a magazine company there. And it took a little arm wrestling, but he got them to agree again if he went back up there. And so we, I think, pretty bravely made the move. It was a big move for us. My husband's from Indiana, and he knew there was a better life than living in New York City. I did not know that, but I quickly learned. It's awesome.
Talk about, you're really underselling what your experience is up there. Talk about your media experience and how you got into the business.
Sure. So I was one of these lucky people who, when I was in high school, I was assigned a community mentor. My family, I came from a family of Italian immigrants. I was raised in a house where we didn't speak English. And I had no intention of going to college because my family had never sent anybody to college. But luckily I was in New Canaan, Connecticut, and the guidance department there was like not cool with that. So they didn't like it if they weren't getting everybody educated in college. So I was the oldest, and the best they could do for me by the time they discovered my family was they assigned me a community mentor, and thank God for me, she was the #2 person in a media company. And so she gave me a job in her media company and assigned me to like the coolest person in the world. And I'm happy to say that today I fund a scholarship in that person's name at the Durham Tech Community College, where I'm the board chair of the Durham Tech Foundation. So she changed my life. The two women really changed my life. So that's how I got into it. And then, luckily for all my younger siblings, the high school saw that they all got fully funded to go to places like Harvard and UConn and really good colleges. So I'm glad, and everybody's doing well today. But I think it's really indicative of like how important mentoring is. And we're not talking about mentoring today, but I always try to put a plug in for it. And I went on to, I was really lucky, I went right to work for a really terrific media company. They were a business-to-business media company, and they happened to be the publisher and owner of a trade show and conference that covered the magazine industry. So, all the great magazine greats you've ever heard of, I actually ended up being VP of Planning and Development, and I ended up running a lot of their trade shows and adding magazines and trade shows to their portfolio. And it was a ball. I worked for them for a long time. Got to meet all the great people you hear about in magazines, the legends, so to speak. In fact, my husband and I, who started the company, obviously, with me, he and I met really at a company, but we didn't get to know each other until we were on Malcolm Forbes's yacht together. I know, so it's pretty cool. I know there's a lot of young people here who probably have no idea who Malcolm Forbes is, but he was.
Or what a yacht is.
Yeah. Right. So it was pretty much a storybook start in media for me. I did work really, really hard. I will say that. I was taught that by my family. You just work your head off.
See, you've taken me in a different direction because now all I'm going to do is talk about the Forbes yacht and how you and Dan met.
Yeah, I know. That's okay.
We'll have to do that later.
We'll do that later.
Okay, so kind of setting up where you're anchored today in your line of work and what you've built down here and your legacy. Give people an insight into pre-digital, what the magazine business was and meant to society.
Right. So I would liken what the magazine business was when I was 30, was very much like what my son and his wife both work for Meta. And it's like, it was a very coveted business to work in, and it was a very profitable business to work in. And it was so creative. Oh, I'm sorry. And it was so creative. That's the one thing I would say is we just had a lot more time and money to spend on all sorts of really cool things to do in media. And we always had events. So the events were absolutely lavish, like what Malcolm Forbes' party. So it was a different time and space. But again, it was very much like working for like the big tech companies now, if you were lucky enough to work in New York City. And New York City was definitely almost all the magazines that meant anything were up there. There really weren't local magazines at that time because newspapers are still incredibly successful at the time. And a lot of times I would work for, or Dan would work for, magazines that were owned by multimedia companies. Today we think of multimedia meaning digital, but at the time it was like if you worked for a big media company, like Dan worked for CBS. CBS owned magazines, they owned newspapers, they owned television stations, and I know I worked for a company that did all those things too. And the newspapers were the cash cow, so that'll give you an idea of how much the world has changed in media, for sure.
Yeah, and it kind of speaks to like that synergy of media, kind of top down and kind of transitioning into how you got to here. One of the things that I remember, I moved to Chapel Hill in 2008, and shortly after I got familiar with Chapel Hill Magazine, and everywhere I went I would see this in stands, and it immediately hit me as high polish. It had a national brand feel for a local magazine, and just want to get your thoughts on that. Was that, obviously I think that was intentional, but.
Absolutely. I think that when Dan and I came, and we were really, I was just explaining to Bo here that we were struggling to find out how to do anything here or what to do here, and we kept walking into restaurants thinking Dan and I were going out for a nice night out, and we'd find ourselves amongst kids from UNC because we didn't know what was a good restaurant and what was a kid's restaurant. And that was kind of how the idea was born. And also we knew from the New York media that newspapers were struggling, but that local and city magazines were doing well. So we brainstormed. I know it's crazy, but the commitment to doing Chapel Hill Magazine, which was the first magazine that we did here, was actually born in London, of all places. We took our family for a week in London, and much to my dismay, actually, Dan basically made us work whenever we could on the Chapel Hill Magazine business plan. And that was a key part of the plan, because we could just see that nothing, we wanted it to look like people felt about their community. And I feel like there was nothing. Design, I think, is incredibly important of every kind, and it still is today. I think we really put a lot of time, I'm looking at Morgan here, she knows, Morgan is at Triangle Media Partners. We put a lot of time, effort, and money into how everything looks. Also, obviously, the content, the writing, but if it doesn't look good, we are not sending it out the door.
Yeah, I think that people sort of, sort of a flash digital age, we kind of see aesthetic, and because it's coming at us so fast, we have this inability to appreciate it. But I think aesthetic speaks to authenticity, care, and then when you combine that with a local flair, local stories, it gets really, really powerful. So in the age of digital, when I'm sure there was a transition point when people thought, well, digital's everything, and print's dead. Talk about how the magazine, the Chapel Hill Magazine, is more of I think, a quality factor for business growth than your traditional pump and dump magazine ad strategy.
So let me make sure I understand your question. Give it to me again in simple
Well,
terms.
that I think when people look at businesses that are involved in Chapel Hill Magazine, they're getting more of a like no trust vibe from the business rather than, hey, we have a sale running on home goods.
Right, and this is something that I think Dan and I were trained in the environments that we worked in, is building a brand is so important, not just for magazines, but for everyone. And I think that especially, I'm just going to say, in a fast-growing area, and we've seen this in Durham, we published Durham Magazine, so many new people coming into an area, choices get really confusing, right? And so they end up making the choice that's familiar, right? And trusted. Those two things. And I think when you have a publication that people trust and enjoy, and you see an ad there, you're assuming that they are a part of your brand, or they are a brand that you're comfortable with. Honestly, we've actually turned down advertising over the years where we felt like it was a brand that would not resonate with people. It's kind of like, I once had the luxury, a really great guy, of meeting Chuck Williams, who is the brain behind Williams-Sonoma, and he spoke at a conference that I ran, and one of the things he said has really stuck with me, and it was the merchandise that they have at Williams-Sonoma. Of course, it's important what they choose in their product line, but it's equally as important as what they do not choose. And he said, he said this to me, he said, I'm such a pain in the ass. When I walk by a Williams-Sonoma store, if I see anything in that window that should not be in the window, I immediately go into the store. He's like, the problem is, no one knows me in the store. He told me some pretty funny stories about making people take things out of the window and having to prove that he was Chuck Williams. But I think that the same thing is true for a magazine. It's like, and that's how when we choose stories, Morgan does such a good job at this, is when we choose stories, it's got to be something that we want to write about and belongs in our magazine. And it's the same thing with ads. And that's one of the reasons that we do a lot of ad design for people, is because we want it to feel like it belongs in the magazine while still staying